So how do we know whether a verdict is correct or not? This is actually a really difficult question to answer. There's no systematic way to know this. We generally only identify a false conviction when new evidence comes to light. This could be a confession from the actual perpetrator, or perhaps new DNA evidence, or some other new evidence that was not originally presented at trial. This type of information doesn't come to light, however, in many cases. It's also true that we rarely have a definitive video recording of a crime to be presented at trial. So how can we estimate the likelihood of a false conviction? One way of starting to answer this question is to look at the data generated by the Innocence Project. This project looks at convictions in the United States of America and makes use of advances in the analysis of forensic evidence that allow for more sensitive tests that were not possible until recently. For example, you might test the DNA that was preserved in a sample of the evidence to see whether it matches the convicted defendant. The analysis of death penalty cases suggests that 4.1% of convictions are actually wrongful. Bornstein and Green suggest, quite correctly, that this analysis is not representative of all types of convictions, and that there's actually very little indication that the false conviction rate in other types of cases is similar. Given that most attention is on death penalty cases and that exonerations become much less frequent when the sentence doesn't include the death penalty or when the death penalty has been commuted to life in prison, Bornstein and Green actually suggest that 4.1% is an underestimate of the false conviction rate. Now, of course, we also have no way of knowing what the false acquittal rate is either. Acquitted defendants generally don't turn around and admit their guilt at the end of the trial. So perhaps, as Bornstein and Green point out, the question should not be whether the verdict was correct, but rather whether it was reasonable given the evidence presented at trial and the relevant law given to the jury. Now, as they suggest, because jury trials tend to be close cases, those where either the prosecution or defence could succeed in being the most persuasive, almost all verdicts are actually reasonable. Now, as an aside, those trials that are not close cases tend to be either dropped if the evidence is weak or plea bargained if the evidence is strong. So, what do you think about the case you've just heard about? Was the jury's verdict correct, or was it at least reasonable?